G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now today we're going to have a look at some fighter aircraft, we're going to look over the maps, some deals being done in Ukraine for defence industries, as well as a look over some drones and little bits and pieces like that. I have hair in my mouth. Anyway, the British Defence Minister and the French Defence Minister and also the NATO Secretary General, of course, Jens Stoltenberg, have been in Kyiv today. And this is all to discuss sort of the next steps in military aid to Ukraine, but their visits also align with Kyiv's first Defence Industries Forum, where Ukrainian officials will meet representatives from 160 different defence firms from 26 countries to then sort out what deals are going ahead into this longer war than I think a lot of planning was putting forward. Now, what we know is private defence companies are very interested in getting contracts in Ukraine. There's huge money going in, huge opportunity, and also great PR for these companies. Like, most people had no idea what a Javelin was, what a HIMARS system or a SciPac drone was until this war. And now everyone wants them, and these have then gone to multi-billion-dollar contracts in other militaries around the world. So there's so much opportunity for these private companies in Ukraine. And I also think that we will start to see more domestically made weapons from these firms, but within Ukraine. And this will actually get around the limitations of using Western sent weapons into Russia. As we know, this has held back Ukraine's ability to actually strike within Russia. So same as, like, say, the SciPac drone that we've seen used in Russia, well, that wasn't sent from Australia. It was sent private company into Ukraine, therefore can be used. I think we'll see more and more of that and domestically produced items in Ukraine as well. And with this, only today, we have seen that Germany's military behemoth Rheinmetall has got the approval for a joint venture in Ukraine. Now, of course, Rheinmetall make the Leopard tank, the Marder IFV, the Gepard air defense system, and more items, but those are the main ones that are already being used successfully in Ukraine and being integrated into then their forces. So let's look at the approval here. So, it's a joint venture between Rheinmetall and the Ukrainian defence industry. The Federal Cartel Office today, not the greatest translation maybe, approved the establishment of a joint venture by Rheinmetall Land System and Ukraine Defence Industry, Kyiv in Ukraine. Rheinmetall is a globally active technology group, active in the defence industry and automotive supply sectors. UDI is a Ukrainian state-owned company in the defence sector with around 67,000 employees and is headed by the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. The defence industry is flux given the geopolitical situation. The joint venture between Rheinmetall and the Ukrainian defence industry being examined here is intended to build and maintain military vehicles in Ukraine. This project will not result in any competitive overlaps in Germany. We gave our approval quickly. The joint venture will be based in Kyiv and undertake activities in the area of service and maintenance, assembly, production and development of military vehicles. It will initially operate exclusively on the territory of Ukraine. In Germany, there are no competitive overlaps, nor are there any indications of competitive concerns. So it won't compete with the industry there and will be in Ukraine. But of course, this could also then be targeted. It will be interesting to see what engineers and stuff from Germany are also there. But I think we'll see more of this, and especially with Rheinmetall, I suspect that Rheinmetall are really needing to dig their heels into more markets, as they've been undercut and overpowered by really South Korean suppliers for both IFVs, tanks, and self-propelled guns recently. Most notably by Poland's just behemoth orders of the K2 tanks from South Korea, as well as the self-propelled guns. And well, especially with them being neighbouring to Germany, and also Australia has chosen to go the South Korean route for new vehicles instead of Germany. So I think Rheinmetall definitely needs to dig their heels into more markets there, and this could be a great opportunity as those vehicles are already in Ukraine to maintain, fix new ones, and I'm not exactly sure where it's going to lie on those weapons being built by Rheinmetall in Ukraine, whether they can be used across the line into Russia either. So that could be interesting. So the United Kingdom Defence Secretary in Kyiv has said, I've been back to Kyiv this week to ask Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky what he needs to win. The French Defence Minister Sébastien Lecornu has said, we know that this war is going to last. We must ensure that tomorrow we continue to be reliable in our aid to Ukraine. Now, Zelensky also held a press briefing with NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, which they both reiterated that they're doing as much as they can for Ukraine to become a NATO member as soon as possible. Zelensky saying, Ukraine already defends the common free space that unites all NATO members. Ukraine's victory in this unprovoked and criminal war unleashed by Russia is guaranteed to ensure long-term security and peace. And not only for our country, but for the entire continent. Jens Stoltenberg also again has said that NATO will provide support to Ukraine for as long as it takes, having this Twitter post up. Honoured to be back in Kyiv to meet President Zelensky. We discuss Ukraine's most urgent needs and the next steps in NATO's support. The stronger Ukraine becomes, the closer we are to ending Russia's aggression. And then this was an excerpt from his speech with Zelensky here.
The stronger Ukraine becomes, the closer we come to ending Russia's aggression. Russia could lay down arms and end its war today. Ukraine does not have that option. Ukraine's surrender would not mean peace. It would mean brutal Russian occupation. Peace at any price would be no peace at all.
So talking that Ukraine can't negotiate, they can't have peace that way, that they need to win the war and that they need to continue pumping weapons basically into Ukraine to continue backing them for strengthening and overpowering from there because they're not willing to have any occupation from either Ukraine or NATO.
Ukraine needs a just and sustainable peace. And I therefore strongly welcome President Zelensky's 10-point plan to achieve that goal. So, Mr. President, Ukraine's future is in NATO. As we work together to prepare you for that future, NATO will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
So, I have no doubt at all that we will see Ukraine eventually become a member of NATO. But this is just not going to be until the war ends. Even after that, there's still going to be standards needed to be reached. But even then, I see that countries will use this as a bargaining chip for some level of diplomatic political victory in that. So might be similar to what we're seeing going on with Sweden and Finland wanting to enter NATO. Finland's in, but Turkey is holding back Sweden because Turkey wants guarantees for the approval of F-16s from the States, and then they'll let Sweden in. So we're going to see a political game like that played here, but we are going to see at some point, I believe, Ukraine enter NATO, but it's not going to be until the end of the war, and we don't know how this war is going to end, when it's going to end. One of the things I'm most likely on that this is still going to go for a number more years. So as well in this, Russia has continued its strikes to try and knock out critical infrastructure, which it did fail in doing completely last year, although it did absolutely limit resources, power, gas in Ukraine as well. But Russia last night launched a large wave of Shahed drones against Ukraine. The strikes targeted the regions of Mykolaiv, Odessa, and Kirovohrad in the center of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine Defense claims that they shot down and engaged 34 of the 44 Shahed drones. Now, Andriy Rakovich, which is Kirovograd's governor, has written on Telegram, "We had an extremely difficult night. Some of the Shaheds over the region were destroyed. However, there were also hits. There were no casualties. There were only a few small fires and dry grass as a result of the falling wreckage of a downed Shahed." Now, we don't have any more on this of photographs that have come out of these strikes. We know they've become much, much more limited as the SBU has been detaining people who have put out those photos for maybe getting some sort of battle damage assessment. According to a press release by the Russian government, the Yuri Gagarin aviation plant has successfully delivered a new batch of claimed 5th generation Sukhoi 57 fighters and 4++ generation Sukhoi 35S fighters given to the Russian aerospace forces. But neither the Russian Defense Ministry nor United Aircraft Corporation, the UAC, we'll speak about that in a sec, specified the exact number of jets actually delivered to the Russian aerospace forces. As we know, producing these high-tech aircraft has been very difficult for Russia and increasingly difficult, both with the problems of the Su-57's production and a test accident has pushed that back a number of years. But the amount of sanctions also put on Russia has definitely hampered the ability to produce such aircraft, especially in large quantities. And we're yet to see the Su-57 confirmed to be used in this war. There are rumours that it likely has been used, but nothing confirmed. Is this Russia not willing to risk losing its premier combat aircraft and to protect the airframe, as maybe it might not be to the acclaimed 5th generation standard? Or is it being held back in case of NATO intervention to then compete with Western aircraft, or waiting until the Western aircraft arrive in Ukraine and then they'll take the skies there? We don't really know. Maybe a bit of both in that. But this is the release given by the Russian government. The Yuri Gagarin of the United Aircraft Corporation transferred the next serial production of the 5th generation Su-57 and generation 4++ fighter, the Su-35S, to the Russian aerospace forces. They've gone under the factory tests. Today, Russian aircraft manufacturing enterprises are picking up a good pace of production, continuing to supply military equipment to our troops. In particular, the enterprises included the Rostec circuit are distinguished by their well-coordinated work. This aviation plant, part of the UAC, transferred the next production Su-57 and Su-35 aircraft to the Russian aerospace forces. Deliveries are being carried out as part of the state defence order by the end of 2023. Russian troops will receive the next stage of aircraft. I would like to note that issues of meeting the needs of the Russian armed forces for reliable and highly efficient equipment can be resolved in a timely manner thanks to the work of the Coordination Council under the government of the Russian Federation. The Russian aerospace forces received a batch of Su-57s as part of a plan for fulfilling the state defence order for the current year. The remaining 5th generation combat vehicles, delivery of which is planned for this year, are in their final assembly shop and are also being tested at the flight test station. And there we have a little bit of footage here of the Su-35 as well, but none of the Su-57. It is a pity that such an awesome looking machine, and I'm sure a great bit of equipment, is used for so much destruction. I wish we could just go up for a fucking joyride in these. And I've always said that these sort of traditional looking fighters, two big tail bloody things, twin engine planes, they look really, really good. I think throwback to a MiG-29, I still think it's the best looking traditional fucking plane ever. You can see the thrust vectoring engines here as well. So I'll put this footage in the Telegram if you'd like to watch it. Now, people have also pointed out that these EW pods on the side are slightly different, but from what I read on this, it was just for then these lights here, which are formation lights to fly together. At least from my reading, I could just be wrong on that, but this would be just awesome, wouldn't it, if you're a fucking pilot? It's the best job in any defence force is a pilot. If I had my time again and tried in school, that's what I'd want to bloody do. Go fly like an F-35, that'd be sick. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Industry and Trade, Denis Manturov, has confirmed that another batch will be delivered as well by the end of this year. Now, Guy Plopsy, who's an Israeli defence analyst, has pointed out that in this footage for this new batch from the UAC, the United Aircraft Corporation, it only appears to show 2 Su-35s, no Su-57s, and only the 2, stating delivery of those first and second batches of Su-35Ss in 2023 took place on June and July, respectively. They too appear to have comprised just 2 aircraft each. Thus, 6 Su-35Ss have seemingly been handed over to the Russian MOD this year. Now, this is just going off the footage released, so maybe they've just filmed those 2. We don't know, or maybe just 6 have gone across. But this comes on the same day that the British MOD have said then this. The Russian Aerospace Forces, the VKS, have lost approximately 90 fixed-wing aircraft in combat since Feb 2022. Of course, being the start of the war. It has also been flying some of its combat aircraft types far more intensively than in peacetime. Oh shit. All aircraft have projected lifespan in flying hours. It is highly likely that with this extra wartime use, Russia is eating into many of its airframes' lifespans far more quickly than the VKS planned for. The need for extra maintenance is complicated by a shortage of spare parts because of the increasing demand and international sanctions. The VKS maintains the ability to surge sortie rates over occupied Ukraine. However, as the war continues much longer than the Russian MOD originally planned for, wear and tear of airframes is likely to have reduced the viability of the VKS long-term tactical air power. Now, you can point out examples of where Russia is not meeting the demand to replace the tanks, to replace other vehicles like this, and that they could be running low, definitely on some types. Things like aircraft, though, this is something I do disagree. 90 is a hell of a lot that they've lost, a hell of a lot. But Russia does have a massive aerospace force, but with the air defense and failing to get air superiority, hasn't really been able to use that air force to its full ability, but it still does have a huge air force in that with, I think it was General Miley or the other bloke, we're talking about the F-16s, Russia still has 1,000 Gen 4 aircraft or something ridiculous. They still have a massive air force here. So yes, they're definitely eating into it. I don't know if the production is meeting maybe what has been shot down, but there's still a hell of a lot to go, like years and years of planes to go in that as well. But one of the big things in that is the bombers. Now, the bombers do pose an issue because these were Soviet produced. I'm meaning your big bombers, your Tu-22, Tu-95, things like that. Once they're gone, they're gone. There's no way to rebuild these. These are all Soviet, and Russia has lost a few of these and are looking like they definitely are protecting them as well. Now, we are going to have a look at the maps. Now, there has been no change on the deep state or the daily Ukraine map update. We do have some from Syriac, so we'll go over that. Of course, this is Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, right here. And then these areas here, not by the red outline, occupied since 22. The beats in the red outline, occupied since 2014. Of course, this is Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk here. Now, one thing I do want to look at is a new Russian missile, continuing on from speaking about Russian planes as well. So we have this footage here that shows this missile here, and this was launched off a Su-34, I believe. You can tell by this front canard here. Let's just have a look for, so you see the missile drop, and the pilot sitting side by side, so I'm fairly confident it is a Su-34 like this. And then we skip forward, and then we see it striking this bridge there. Now, we have this then geolocated as well from EJ Shahid, does a really great job of these. So this is where it's geolocated to. You can line those up there. Now, this is the grid reference, and this is the exact location. So near Sadov, and this is just to the south then of Kupiansk. So this is where my mouse is right here. So just away from the front line. Let's go, it's about here somewhere. So we're talking like 14 Ks behind the front line, but a direct strike on that bridge. And that more confirms that Russia still is pushing fairly hard in this northeastern sector of the country. Now, it is interesting with these missiles, some more information has been released as this is said to be a new one. So here we go. The combat work appeared of a Su-34 bomber with the latest Kh-38 MLE air-to-surface missile. In the footage, you can see the missile descending and its further flight to the next Ukrainian armed forces crossing. And this is the part that is very interesting, and this is why I bring it up. The active honing head laser illumination of the target is provided by Recon UAV, so other drones with a corresponding payload. In case the video, this is carried out by an all-armed 30 drone, so Recon drone, which guides almost all Russian products with a semi-active seeker. So it's basically lays the bridge, and then this then hits it with a missile. The missile is designed to destroy armored, durable, vulnerable, ground-based single and group targets, as well as surface targets in the coastal zone at a distance of up to 70 kilometers. Recently, the production of these missiles was caught on video during the visit of Sergei Shoigu to the KTRV Corporation. So confirmed that those missiles are now in service there too. Now, we do have a little bit more on the Russian strikes from ISW. Russian aviation is increasingly active in the Kharkiv, Lugansk, and Kherson Oblast, and apparently less active in areas of western Zap Oblast, where Ukrainian forces are conducting counter-offensive operations. So Zap Oblast, of course, is where Robotyne is. Kharkiv, Lugansk up in the northeast we're talking about, and Kherson, of course, in the west. Russian forces have been increasingly conducting airstrikes against targets in the west bank of Kherson Oblast and against rear Ukrainian ground lines of communication in the Kupiansk direction, like we just saw. Ukrainian Eastern Group Forces spokesperson Captain Ilya Yevlash stated on the 28th of September that Russian Su-35 aircraft and Ka-52 helicopters are increasingly active in the Kupiansk and Liman sectors, and the Russian forces conducted 21 airstrikes in these directions, primarily near Seversk. Kherson Oblast Military Administrator spokesperson Alexander Tolokonyov stated on September 28th that Russian forces have increased the number of airstrikes on Kherson City and the right bank of Kherson Oblast by a factor of 3 or 4 in the past 3 days, and that Russian forces dropped more than 50 aerial glide bombs against targets in these areas. So there we do see an increase in the use of bombers and the combat helicopters. Now, as well in the maps, there are many rumors that Wagner Group is returning to Ukraine, both in frontline and training capacity, especially around the northeastern sector and then in Bakhmut. So let's have a look over what is said here. Now, let's look over Bakhmut. A spokesperson for Ukraine's eastern grouping of forces, Ilya Yevlash, we just spoke about, reported on 27th September that Ukrainian forces have enjoyed unspecified success along the Bakhmut axis. Now, it doesn't show on any of the maps the movement there. Specifically, he reported that successful operations took place near Klishkivka, Odorivka, and Shumi, located south of Bakhmut. Notably, Russian sources have reported over the last 24 hours that Ukrainian forces are pushing hard east of Klishkivka, where they are trying to advance towards the railway line and the highway. Russian claims that they've repelled all these attacks cannot be confirmed. Now, here as well. Yevlash reported that around 500 former Wagner Group personnel fighting as part of the MOD-controlled units are currently in Bakhmut area. Yevlash stated that their numbers are unlikely to change the situation on the battlefield around Bakhmut. Significantly, we assess that this claim is likely to be accurate. It remains likely that ongoing disagreements among Wagner Group remnants are undermining efforts to retain the private military company PMC's independence, but there has been a lot more rumours that have popped up in a lot more places there as well, but we don't have any of that confirmed. Now, up in the Kupiansk sector, which is where we're looking, where we saw that strike, that the ISW says Russian and Ukrainian officials are increasingly reporting fewer Russian ground attacks in the Kupiansk and Liman directions, indicating that Ukrainian offensive operations have drawn Russian forces away from the Kupiansk-Svatov-Kremenar line. So, of course, what we've talked about is try and draw the Russians from up here, where they were having some success, down into the south here. And Russia was somewhat doing the same, trying to draw Ukrainian soldiers up into this area too. But let's actually have a look at what we've seen change on these maps. So we're going to come down first is on this sort of Uruzani front line. I've been calling it into Purutini in here, and look at what Suryak then says. So day 581, situation southwest of Donetsk. During the last 48 hours, Russian army made some advance north of Purutini. So here we have this area, and see that these two paddocks here that it's saying Russia has advanced up into this area here as well. Now, we're just going to move a little bit to the northeast of then where we are. So we have Mariinka here. Of course, this purple here is then the ground held since 2014. This is Donetsk city, and Krasnodarivka is where we're looking. Doesn't show any update on this map, but Suryak states, situation west of Donetsk city, Russian army made small advances towards the town of Krasnodarivka here. So showing just a very small advancement just in this little bit of area there. Now, where we are going to go is up into Bakhmut, where we know there's a hell of a lot of fighting, but the map doesn't seem to be changing much. And then just up into the north here near Okovo Vasilivka here too. So then Suryak then says this. Situation north of Bakhmut. During the last 4 days, the Russian army retook the initiative in the axis of Orakovka-Vasilivka and managed to enter the first houses in the town. The total capture of the locality is not correct. So saying that Russia has not captured all of Orakovka-Vasilivka in here, but has managed to push up into these first runs of houses. So we see these paddocks here. These are these paddocks. You can tell by this funny shaped one here that they've pushed somewhere up into just the first houses in here by Suryak, saying, as we do know, Ukraine had an advancement in here too, pushing back. But over the other maps, we don't see any other changes at all. Legends. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and I hope you've got a good weekend planned. I don't know who I'm going for in the football yet. I'm not the biggest footy fan. This video has been very difficult to get through. So for some reason, I could not speak. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Cheers. Bye-bye.